Hello, and welcome to Show Me History. I'm your host, Amy Blankenship. Around the turn of the last century, the area between Union Station and Grand along Market was a bustling community. Mill Creek Valley was home to a large African-American community. Victim to urban renewal and slum clearance, Mill Creek Valley was razed and its residents displaced throughout the city. The neighborhood of Mill Creek Valley ran east along 20th Street, west to Grand Avenue, north to Olive Street, and was bounded by railroad yards to the south. Occupation of land can be traced back to the 1700s. In 1765, Joseph Talion built a grist mill along the creek that ran from present-day Vanderbilt Avenue to the Mississippi River. The creek was named La Petite River and later renamed Mill Creek. On August 11, 1766, Pierre Laclede bought the land in the mill. He built a larger grist mill to accommodate the flour need for the village of St. Louis. He also built a dam on the creek that created Choteau's Pond. After Laclede's death, the land was sold to Auguste Choteau. Other mills and companies sprang up along the creek, created St. Louis's first industrial complex. In 1852, Choteau's Pond was drained. There had been a cholera epidemic a few years prior, and government officials thought it best to drain the pond for public health purposes. After this, the district had become a mixed combination of residential areas, industries, and railroad yards. The area was first settled by German immigrants. As time passed, other immigrant populations moved in and out of Mill Creek Valley. After the Civil War, African Americans began moving to St. Louis in large numbers and found Mill Creek Valley an ideal place to settle. By 1894, Union Station was open, bringing more traffic to St. Louis. The area now boasted 32 railroad lines, most of which had tracks on the southern side of Mill Creek Valley. During the Great Migration, African Americans moved from southern states to major cities in the north, including St. Louis. 6 million African Americans migrated from the south to the north, Midwest, and urban areas from 1910 to 1940. Mill Creek Valley saw a huge population growth during this time. Creation of this community was a result of redlining, housing restrictions, and underfunding from the city. In 1916, St. Louis citizens voted to restrict neighborhood occupancy by race. Although this was overturned by the Supreme Court in 1948, the practice continued. Racial covenants on deeds limited who could live where. Just a side note, in 2021, almost 30,000 city properties still had a racially restrictive covenant on the deed, unbeknownst to the owners. In June 2022, Missouri formally banned this discriminatory language in deeds. Mill Creek Valley was a working-class African-American community. It was a completely self-sufficient and thriving neighborhood. 450 acres of land downtown held stores, barbers, salons, schools, churches, doctors, lawyers, the Pine Street YMCA, and the baseball park for the St. Louis Stars, the first African-American-owned ballpark and part of the Negro Baseball League. As one of the oldest sections in the city, Mill Creek Valley had all types of housing from grand mansions to boarding houses. But this flourishing community of nearly 20,000 was targeted by city government as an eyesore and would soon be on the chopping block. In 1936, St. Louis Planning Commission noticed signs of lower population in the city's core. They felt if actions were not taken, the city would collapse. Older areas are being abandoned, and the trend will spread throughout the city. By 1947, the commission had created a comprehensive city plan, land clearance in the heart of the city. Various areas were deemed as blighted and obsolete. Any area labeled as such was subject to clearance. The Federal Housing Act of 1949 gave funds to cities to overtake land for development and renewal for public use. It gave city governments permission to clear what they deemed as blighted areas. St. Louis alone received $23 million. It was now possible for the city of St. Louis to carry out its comprehensive plan. In 1950, Mayor Darst announced his plan for clearance of the blighted and slum areas of the city. The report for Mill Creek Valley looked grim. Their area had substandard housing. Laws and codes had changed, but the buildings of Mill Creek Valley had not been updated for the most part. They lacked safety measures such as fire escapes, and for some buildings, modern conveniences like indoor plumbing and electricity did not exist. 99% of the structures were in need of some degree of repair. 80% of the buildings were without private baths or toilets, and 67% had no running water at all. The community was densely packed with a high crime rate, 4 times higher than that of the city's average rate. With nearly 20,000 residents, Mill Creek Valley had a mix of tenants and homeowners. Urban renewal was on the way. Major cities across the United States were clearing slums in the hopes of slowing migration to the suburbs. What was deemed blighted areas were marked for redevelopment for commercial and residential use with federal and state monies. The 1954 Housing Act updated the previous act by providing funds not just for new construction and demolition, but also rehabilitation and conservation of deteriorating areas. On August 7, 1954, Mayor Raymond Tucker announced his plan to demolish Mill Creek Valley, 465 acres running west of Union Station to St. Louis University. This was the city's largest urban renewal project, and for a time, the largest in the nation. Residents protested, but to no avail. The Citizens Council on Housing and Planning Commission stated, quote, "No more dramatic example may be found than these 54 blocks located in the very center of our city. People going and coming from work throughout this district are offended by the state of decay they witness on all sides. Unfortunately, too, every visitor who arrives in our city by train is given a poor impression of St. Louis, as he or she is transported immediately through such dismal districts." End quote. Government officials viewed Mill Creek Valley as an eyesore that had to go. In 1955, the citizens of St. Louis passed a bond issue to revitalize the city. $10 million of this bond were allocated for the demolition of Mill Creek Valley. The Land Clearance and Redevelopment Authority was charged with fighting urban decay and blight. They secured loans and grants from federal government as well as private land donations to carry out the city's plans. Their 3-pronged approach focused on slum clearance, urban renewal, and revitalization of city neighborhoods. They planned for new schools, a new highway, Highway 40, a new Busch Stadium, and luxury apartment buildings. Their goal was to re-gentrify downtown in hopes of increasing population and tax revenue. With their newly acquired federal funds, the Land Clearance and Redevelopment Authority created a public housing complexes such as Darst Webb, Pruitt-Igoe, Carr Square Village, and Clinton Peabody. In 1958, St. Louis created a redevelopment plan for Mill Creek Valley. It would later be revised in 1960. The city had the option to use federal funds to renew the area, to update and improve housing. They chose to raze instead. The Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority published the plan. They would demolish 93% of the neighborhood, proposing that some of the streets in the southern portion be redeveloped into the Daniel Boone Expressway, better known as Highway 40. Land use would be for residential, commercial, and industry. The creation of new streets and alleys would occur as needed, and the original plan did not include the demolition of the Pine Street YMCA. This would change as the project progressed. The existing zoning would remain in place so the city did not have to relocate water lines or fire hydrants. Strict regulations and control would be in place for all buildings in the district. There were regulations for lot size, use, density, building setback, and landscaping. Developers were to conform to these regulations for 25 years. All buildings, walkways, improvements, fixtures, equipment, landscaping, and paved areas were to be kept in full repair and structurally sound. Note: their plan did not include provision for low-income housing to assist the residents being relocated by this slum clearance. On March 28, 1958, the St. Louis aldermen voted to clear the neighborhood. With a 27-1 vote, the only dissenting vote came from Archie Bain of the 9th Ward. He had 97% of the proposed land clearance in his district. Financing would come from a mix of public and private funds. Most monies were from the federal government. The true cost at the end were $23 million in federal funds. The city of St. Louis provided $11.4 million, and private investors anteed up $25 million. Out of all the funds used to dismantle a neighborhood, Families that were being displaced were only given up to $100 to cover their moving expenses. Heralded by the press as a progressive and good plan to deal with troubled areas of the city, the press focused on slum clearance, conditions, and substandard housing. There is no mention of the vibrant, thriving community that was planned for destruction. On February 15, 1959, the first round of clearing began. Mayor Raymond Tucker and other city officials were in attendance to watch the first building meet its end with a wrecking ball. A tenement building at 3518 Laclede Avenue was the first to go. It was a house dating back from the 1870s. Today, the Marquette Towers of St. Louis University are located on the grounds of that former house. During demolition, looters ransacked the buildings, taking whatever they could from Victorian mansions and other better-off buildings. One Post-Dispatch article at the time laments the history of fine houses and the loss of grand buildings, but no comment is made about the displaced residents and the destruction of an entire community. In all, 19,700 residents, 4,202 families were displaced. 79 city blocks were razed. Blocks that once held 839 booming businesses and 57 housing units. 465 acres of what was once a flourishing community were flattened. Over 40 churches were torn down. The Union Memorial United Methodist Church at Pine and Leffingwell had been the Old Temple Israel. Founded in 1846, it held one of the oldest African American congregations in St. Louis. The building was demolished in 1960, but the congregation was able to construct a new church on Belt Avenue, just south of Page. Another church to see its demise during urban renewal was St. Paul AME Church at 15 North Leffingwell. It was the first church to be built by African Americans in St. Louis. One of the last structures still standing in Mill Creek, it was finally bulldozed in 1964. The congregation had attempted to buy back the building from the Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority, but failed. They were able to relocate to a new building on Hamilton Avenue. Many buildings of cultural and historical significance were leveled without a second thought by the city government. Some of those were to come down were the Pine Street YMCA, City Hospital No. 2, and the People's Finance Building. The People's Finance Building, located at Jefferson and Market, was an African-American-owned bank. A pillar of the community, it was a landmark in Mill Creek Valley. For 3 decades, it stood at the center of politics, social, and commercial life. It was the first commercial building entirely owned by African-American money. It held 81 offices, an assembly hall, 7 stores, a penthouse ballroom, and a rooftop garden. Offices for the NAACP, Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, Colored Motion Picture Operations, Missouri Pacific Railroad, Wabash Railroad, St. Louis American Newspaper, and the St. Louis Argus newspaper all operated out of the People's Finance Building. Only 4 buildings remain from the Great Clearing in Mill Creek Valley. The red brick building at 2213 to 19 Scott Street is still standing. Over the years, it's been home to various flower companies. Another surviving building is located at 3128 Olive Street. Dink's Parish Laundry was designed in 1916 by William Lovey. Although the original business closed in 1943, the building housed several other ventures over the years, such as Morgan Linen Company and the Loft Jazz Club. Still sporting an ornate tile facade with bright blue tiles spelling out Dink's Parish Laundry, the building is now home to the Parish Lofts. The building housing Vashon High School at 3026 Laclede Avenue survived as well. Although the school itself moved to another location on Cass Avenue, the building is now part of Harris Stowe's campus. Other cities began similar projects, clearing of African American communities and relocating them to public housing. Urban renewal was dubbed Negro removal. Mill Creek Valley was one of the few places within St. Louis City that African Americans were permitted to live. When it was destroyed, they had even fewer options. Displaced residents were scattered across the St. Louis area, moving to low-income projects like Pruitt-Igoe and cities in St. Louis's northern suburbs such as Wellston. Residents in Mill Creek Valley were told by the city that that's where they had to live. Now the city was saying, you can't live there anymore. A community was ruined. Lives were displaced. People were forced to move away from their schools, jobs, family, church, and home. As a side note, I highly recommend to my listeners that you read a book by Vivian Gibson. It's entitled The Last Children of Mill Creek Valley. In that book, Gibson tells her story of the Mill Creek Valley clearing from the perspective of a girl living in the neighborhood amongst her family and friends. Demolition was quick, but there wasn't necessarily a solid plan for the people or the land after the clearing. Although the city had grandiose plans for the land, nothing ever came of them. It was called Hiroshima Flats by locals in the 1960s, a barren expanse of land with no purpose. By 1961, only 20 families remained in Mill Creek Valley. 70% of businesses located in the community had closed. A few were able to move to other places in the metro area and open shop. In 1964, Laclede opened on the grounds of what was Mill Creek Valley. It contained houses, apartments, townhouses, shops, and restaurants. It was managed by Jerry Berger, who hand-selected residents to ensure integration by all means possible: race, age, gender, class, income level, education, career type, everything. This community was phased out by the mid-1980s and was totally demolished in 1995. The area never attracted the interest that mayors Tucker and Darsh dreamed of. After Laclede failed, the land sat vacant for a number of years. Again, large tracts of land were purchased by St. Louis University and Harris Stowe College. In 1965, St. Louis University began acquiring land to expand their campus east from Grand Boulevard to Compton Avenue. They built athletics fields, housing, various campus buildings, Bush Memorial Center, Grant Tower Apartments, Grand Forest Apartments, Laclede Park Apartments, and the Stan Musial Field. Harris Stowe used their land to purchase and extend their campus east of Compton Avenue. Today, Mill Creek Valley is commemorated via the Brick Line Greenway. The Greenway is a brick pathway that stretches 1 mile along Market Street to Compton and 22nd Street, the old Vashon High School building on Harris Stowe's campus, to the new St. Louis City Stadium. Its goal is to tell history that hasn't really been shared before. Once completed, the Greenway will link 17 neighborhoods through 20 miles of pathway in the city. A work in progress. One day the Brickway will crisscross the city with paths from the Arch to Forest Park and Tower Grove Park to Fairgrounds Park. It will feature hundreds of destinations along its route, sharing information you don't find in history books. The Mill Creek Valley portion of the Brickline Greenway was unveiled in February of 2023. The Pillars of the Valley was officially dedicated on March 27, 2023. Designed by artist Damon Davis, the artwork consists of several components on the grounds of St. Louis City Stadium. The sidewalk on the south side of the stadium features bronze plaques where the houses in Mill Creek Valley once stood. The names, ages, and occupations of the house's residents are listed on the plaques. The Pillars of the Valley sculpture is located at North 22nd and Market Streets. 8 granite and limestone pillars, each 15 feet tall with a hollowed-out midsection, commemorate the historic St. Louis neighborhood. Within each pillar are etched quotes from former Mill Creek Valley residents. Artist Damon Davis saw this project as an opportunity to tell the history of forgotten people. The Pillars of the Valley symbolize an hourglass in which time has stopped. It serves to remind us all of a forgotten neighborhood demolished in the name of urban renewal. Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on our website at showmehistorystl.com, Twitter, showme_history, or Facebook at showmehistorystl. Until next time, I'll see you in the loop.